It took me decades to understand this literary allusion. In Good Wives, the second book of Little Women, there is a scene in which Meg has to confess to her husband John that she has spent more money than they can afford on a silk dress, an unfinished silk dress, which means she will have to spend even more money before it becomes wearable. And John says, "Well, dear, what's the dem'd total?" as Mr. Mantalini says. I did not know who Mr. Mantalini was when I first read this at about 11 or 12 years old, and I had no way of looking it up. So I just read the scene as it was. Meg was feeling guilty. John was upset, but also inclined to forgive, and they worked it out. Years later, I was able to look up who Mr. Mantalini was. I learned he was a character created by Charles Dickens who was very extravagant and vain, and who liked spending his wife's money, take note, on things that he did not really need but wanted to show off, such as new clothes. And it didn't matter that he still had a lot of good clothes at home, some of which were still relatively new. He wanted the latest things and he wanted to be seen in them. And then it made a little more sense. So, of course, there would be an allusion to Mr. Mantalini here, even though the roles are a bit reversed. Instead of an extravagant husband who uses the money that his wife works hard for, we have an extravagant wife who wastes the money that her husband works hard for. But it wasn't until I finally read Nicholas Nickleby, which is the novel in which Mr. Mantalini appears, that I realized how much deeper the allusion goes, because we cannot really discuss Mr. Mantalini without also discussing his wife, Madame Mantalini. The sad thing about Madame Mantalini is that she knows her husband wastes money, her hard-earned money. He doesn't have a job. She knows this, and it hurts her, and she actually ends up in serious financial difficulty because of it. And yet, all he has to do to get her to forgive him and to look the other way again is to sweet talk her a little, to kiss her hand, to be romantic again. And yes, she just looks the other way and becomes an accessory to her own financial abuse. So when John compares Meg to Mr. Mantalini, he's also comparing himself to Madame Mantalini. And it doesn't seem to be a thought that occurs to him in the moment, but something he has been thinking of for a while. And the text does tell us that looking over Meg's expense book each month is a lighthearted moment between Meg and John. He seems to enjoy seeing the little things that women enjoy buying for themselves. But now the text also tells us that John has been denying himself many pleasures for Meg's sake. He has actually been hurting because of the thoughtless spending of his spouse. But not just that, he has been hurting because he has been making a joke out of her thoughtless spending. And he laughed over it and let her laugh over it until she finally racked up an expense that he really could not afford. And when he says, "I was afraid of this," the tragic part is that he was afraid of it, he knew it was bound to happen, and he did not do anything to stop it. Until this moment, I admit I never really cared for John Brooke as a character. I didn't hate him, but I did not especially like him. He did not really stand out for me in the extended March family universe of Louisa May Alcott. I had always found him a little two-dimensional. someone who was there for Meg's story and Meg's character development, but did not really have much of a story of his own. Now I am changing my mind. Rereading this chapter from Good Wives with my knowledge of Nicholas Nickleby gives John greater depth. He is no longer just Meg's husband. He is also a man who knowingly married a woman who could easily have her head turned by pretty things, and who liked having wealthy friends, even if she envied them, and who really almost married rich, if it had not been for the better influence of her mother. And he is also a man who has been knowingly indulging her in these weaknesses. And even before this moment in the novel happens, he may have started asking himself, am I the Madame Mantalini in my own marriage? Am I letting my spouse play me for a fool? Am I willingly playing the fool? And when that expense comes up, those $50 for silk, he had to admit the answer was yes. Louisa May Alcott gives the Brookes a happier ending than Dickens gives the Mantalinis. And that's because we could say they work for their happy ending. They have the self-awareness it takes to realize when they've been wrong, and the fortitude it takes to actually do something to fix the mistakes that they made. But what I really like about this is that the self-awareness came about thanks to the clarity from a really, really good literary allusion. This is something that I'm sure the first readers of Little Women got immediately. They would also be more familiar with Dickens's work than we are. And I'm glad I finally caught up to them. For more on my thoughts on Nicholas Nickleby, I have a video essay entitled Coincidence and Good Luck in Dickens. I've also done a review in which I rate the book according to a 5P methodology, which you might find interesting. Unfortunately, neither one mentions the Mantalinis again, but it does touch on other characters and other themes, which I found interesting and hope that you will too. And if you have thoughts on the Mantalinis or even the Brookes, on Dickens or Louisa May Alcott, I hope you will leave me a comment. Thank you for watching.